My name is Edward. When I heard my wife say something that confirmed every fear I'd been pushing aside for years, it didn't just hurt. It pulled the last thread that was barely holding our marriage together. And once that thread snapped, there was no going back. This is the story of how I got to that moment, what led up to it, what I felt when I heard those words, and what I chose to do afterward. So let me take you back to how everything began. I met Brittany at a time when both of us were dealing with our own kind of loneliness. And somehow, in that shared emptiness, we found each other. I had just lost my dad. He was my only close surviving family member. My mom died when I was 7, and from that point on, my dad became my whole world. He raised me alone, did his best, and was always there. He worked long hours, but still made time to help with homework, show up for school events, and just be there in the small quiet ways that mattered. When I finally got older, finished school, and landed a good job, I looked forward to the day I could finally start giving back, maybe take him on a vacation, or just be the one looking after him for once. But that never got to happen. Just when it seemed like life was settling, he got diagnosed with cancer again. He had beaten it once years ago, but this time, it came back stronger, more aggressive. And before I could process what was happening, he was gone. I was drowning in grief, and honestly, I had no one to talk to. Most of my friends were caught up in their own lives, and I had no siblings or extended family I was close to. That's when Brittany entered the picture. She had just moved to the city, didn't really know anyone, and was trying to figure out her life. I met her because she lived just a few houses down from my dad. During the final stretch of my dad's illness, there were days I couldn't be there physically due to work. So I asked Brittany, who I had only met a few times by then, if she could check in on him once in a while. She agreed without hesitation. She was kind and gentle. The kind of person who never made a fuss, but somehow managed to get things done. She'd drop off groceries, make sure he took his medication, and sometimes just sit with him for company. My dad really liked her. And over time, I started talking to her more, not just about my dad, but about life. She never tried to offer solutions. She just listened. And in that quiet space, something started to grow between us. After I buried my father, the silence hit harder than ever. The house felt cold, and Brittany was the only person who felt familiar. She had been part of that difficult chapter, and in a way, she understood parts of my grief without me needing to explain it. We started spending more time together. It wasn't thrilling or romantic in the classic sense, but it was steady. It felt like something I could hold on to. Looking back now, I realized I confused comfort for connection. There was no real spark, not the kind I had in my previous relationship. But at the time, I thought that spark was probably overrated. Maybe being with someone who was consistent and kind was better than chasing butterflies that never lasted. That's what I told myself. So when we eventually started dating, it wasn't some passionate whirlwind. It was quiet, simple. We both had our wounds, and we leaned on each other because no one else was there. And that's probably where the problem began. Because sometimes what starts as mutual survival isn't enough to build a future on, but I didn't know that back then. I genuinely believed we were together forever. That belief would be tested later, but at the time, I thought we were doing okay. And after what I had just been through, okay felt like enough. Or at least, I thought it did. So after 2 years of dating and living together, one evening, we were just spending time together like we usually did in the living room. She turned to me and said, "Maybe we should just get married." I remember feeling stunned, not necessarily in a bad way, but I was caught off guard. It wasn't something I had been thinking about at that moment, but I sat there thinking, why not? I mean, here was someone who had stayed when my world had fallen apart. She didn't run when life got dark. She was there through the quiet, depressing days after my dad's funeral. She helped me manage the grief, even she didn't really talk much about it. And when you're broken, loyalty starts to look a lot like love. I convinced myself that this was probably what mature relationships looked like. And love wasn't meant to feel like fireworks, but more like a steady flame. So I agreed. We didn't throw a huge wedding. Neither of us had a big family, and honestly, I didn't have the energy for anything grand. We had a small ceremony with a few people, but here's what I didn't say out loud at the time. Deep down, I already knew there were cracks in the foundation. From the very start, Brittany had this emotional wall around her. She was never the type to talk about how she felt deeply. When I tried to be vulnerable with her about my feelings, she would just look at me and say nothing. In the beginning, I told myself that not everyone expresses themselves the same way. She might have gone through something that made her guarded. I gave her every benefit of the doubt. I told myself love wasn't about constant validation or needing to hear "I love you" all the time. But looking back, I don't think I ever heard her say it unless I said it first. It was never spontaneous, never from her own lips, without prompting. So when she asked to get married, I thought this was it. Maybe this was her way of showing love. She didn't say it, but she was ready to commit, and that meant something. I believed she was finally letting me in. I was wrong, and I wouldn't fully realize how wrong I was until much later. Months after we got married, I kept waiting for things to get better, for that emotional connection to deepen, or even just settle into something more comfortable. But the truth is, nothing changed. In fact, it slowly got worse. Looking back, I don't think there was ever a honeymoon phase. There was no sense of closeness or renewed joy after we tied the knot. Instead, what followed was a slow, quiet erosion of any hope I had that our marriage could grow into something fulfilling. It started small. Brittany would get distant for days at a time. She'd be quiet, cold, sometimes even irritable, but with no real explanation. I'd come home, ask her how her day was, and she'd just shrug or give me a flat fine. It was like living with someone who had built an invisible wall around themselves. And no matter how gently or patiently I tried, I couldn't find a way to break through. What was worse was that when I'd ask her what was wrong, she always had a quick, shallow excuse. "It's just hormones," or "I'm probably about to start my period," or "I just need sleep." Those were the kind of answers I'd get. Nothing that opened the door to a real conversation. Nothing that invited me in as her partner. It felt like every time I asked, I was being told politely to stop asking. And I listened. I stopped pushing. I tried not to take it personally, even though it felt deeply personal. The truth is, I wasn't happy. But I stayed quiet because this was the woman who had stood by me when I buried my father. She was there when I was at my lowest, and in my mind that loyalty deserved patience in return. So I kept trying to be the calm one. I gave her space when she asked for it. I thought if I kept showing up with love and kindness, things would shift. Then one day, out of nowhere, she told me she was gonna start seeing a therapist. I remember how hopeful I felt in that moment. I thought this was it. Maybe she was finally ready to deal with whatever was going on beneath the surface. Maybe we'd finally be able to talk openly, work through the distance, and start building something real between us. I asked her if she needed me to join her, and she said no. Even when she started, that turned out to be another closed door. No details about conversations about what she was learning or how she was feeling or what the root of her issues might be. I would gently ask, "How was your session today?" And she'd just say fine or it was okay, then change the subject. I didn't want to invade her privacy, but I was her husband. And yet, I felt like a stranger. Still, I stayed. I believed she'd open up when she was ready. One Thursday, I left work a bit early because my last meeting got canceled. I figured I'd just go home. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed a car I didn't recognize right away, but it clicked, her friend's car. I'd seen it once or twice before. I walked into the house through the front door. Everything was quiet. Then, I heard faint laughter coming from the back porch. I assumed they were just catching up, maybe having a drink or two. I wasn't planning to interrupt them for long, just a quick hey before heading upstairs to change. So I started walking toward the back door. But right before I stepped out, I heard Brittany's voice, then I paused to hear what they were talking about. I was barely there for a second before she continued with her statement. "I didn't marry Edward because I loved him," she said. Her voice slurring just slightly like she'd had a glass or two of wine. "I married him because I was terrified of being alone. He's kind, boring, but kind. And I guess I just needed someone safe." I didn't move. I couldn't. I felt like someone had yanked all the air out of the room. Her friend asked her something next. I think she was just as stunned as I was. She said, "You don't love him?" And without missing a beat, Brittany answered, "No." I never did. I just didn't have the energy to keep dating. I thought maybe love would grow. It didn't. Those words broke my heart. At that moment, all the puzzle pieces that never quite fit suddenly locked into place. Her coldness, her constant mood swings, and her lack of affection now made sense. Even that one time she casually joked, "I don't believe in soulmates," which I had laughed off back then. She really meant it. She never loved me. Not even in the beginning. I was just the safest bet she could make when she got tired of looking for someone she actually wanted. I didn't go outside anymore. I just turned around quietly and walked back like a ghost. I climbed the stairs slowly, opened the door to my home office, stepped inside, and locked it behind me. I had never locked that door before. Brittany and I didn't even use locks in the house. It was just never something we did. But that evening, I needed that door closed. I needed something between me and the rest of the world. I sat in that room for hours. It wasn't until much later that I heard footsteps on the stairs. The friend must have left. Brittany must have seen my car parked. She came up and tried to open my office door, but of course, it was locked. I heard her jiggle the knob, then she started knocking. "Edward," she said, knocking gently. "Are you in there?" I didn't answer. She knocked again, this time more confused. Then my phone started buzzing. It was her. I picked up and simply said, "Please don't disturb me." She went silent on the line and I hung up. She didn't try again after that. Maybe she thought I was just in a bad mood. She had no idea I'd heard everything. No clue that she'd cracked open something she couldn't close again. I stayed in that office all night. By the time the sun came up, I knew what I had to do. There was no anger in me. Just clarity. We had no children. No shared property. Nothing binds us except a marriage that meant nothing to her. The only thing I'd ever given her a value was the car I bought for her on our last anniversary. That's it. So I waited until she left for work. The moment I heard the front door close behind her and the engine of her car fade into the distance, I stood up, walked to the bedroom to pack my things, then locked the front door behind me and walked away. I had nowhere to go in the traditional sense, so I checked into a hotel sitting on the edge of a stiff mattress. I opened my laptop and sent an email to my boss telling him I won't be coming today because of an emergency. He responded hours later telling me to take the day. I contacted a divorce lawyer to end things. There was no turning back. Eventually, later that day, Brittany came home to discover I was gone. The first few calls came back to back, but I didn't pick up. I let the calls ring out, but she kept calling. Eventually, I answered. She asked me where I had gone. Why were my things missing? I just told her the truth. I won't be your emotional placeholder. She acted confused, like she didn't understand what I was saying. I told her clear and simple. I've been in a loveless marriage for almost 4 years, and I do not wish to spend a day more. She was silent. Probably trying to think of something to say, but I didn't wait. I ended the call. I didn't pick up or answer any of her calls or messages after this. I didn't even have to go through the stress of freezing our joint account because I'd already stopped using it long before everything fell apart. My salary didn't go into that account anymore. It hadn't for quite a while. When the divorce papers finally landed in her hands a few days later served by my lawyer, that was when she finally got the full picture. That was when she realized I wasn't bluffing. She must have asked the lawyer why I was filing for divorce, and I'm sure he told her what I told him. After that, she shifted gears. She started reaching out to people we both knew, trying to get them to talk to me. She told them therapy was helping her heal, that she was starting to understand herself better. Maybe she was. I don't know. But for me, it didn't change anything. I told everyone who came to me on her behalf the same thing. I'm done. Not out of spite, not because I wanted to punish her, but because there was truly nothing left inside me to offer that marriage. I gave what I could and what I didn't give, I tried to grow. But after a while, you have to accept when it's over even if it doesn't come with closure tied up in a need bow. One of the last steps I took was filing a request with the court to take my name off the lease for the house we once shared. I had co-signed it back then, but now I didn't want to be tied to any piece of that life. Eventually, everything got finalized, divorce paper signed, lease adjusted, all legal matters settled. The chapter was officially closed. But even after that, Brittany kept trying to stay connected. She still calls sometimes, though I rarely answer. She thinks we can be friends. I don't really know. Occasionally, I'll reply to a text if it seems serious or personal. Not because I want anything from her, but just out of some leftover sense of respect for what we used to be or just to avoid unnecessary drama. But as for the relationship, the marriage, the future we were supposed to have, that's gone completely. And I've made peace with that. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel.